All right, folks. So no, we will get going. The cameras are rolling, recording is happening. So yeah, most of you maybe already know who I am, but yeah, my name is Matthew. I'm here with Mark and of course Scott. I am host of a podcast called Junior Resource Investing, and Scott has been gracious enough to appear on my show a couple of times. I'm not going to waste too much time introducing him. I assume you know who he is as well as his company. We are here to discuss some very interesting recent results, and I just want to say that you can consider this as a sequel to the previous webinar, right? So that there is a webinar that Invictus released, is it just 24 hours ago or so now, right? And so hopefully that there will be questions here today that are mostly building off that webinar rather than kind of repetition. We're trying to build new content. A little bit of repetition is inevitable, but yeah, just if you are missing some content and you have not yet seen the webinar that was released, it's pretty strong, 35 minutes. I would suggest you start with that as well, or return to that afterwards. I do want to stress that this is going to be, there's a lot of forward-looking statements involved in this, right? Obviously, this is a very fluid situation for Invictus and for Scott. So, he is going to do his best to answer questions as he can. But at the same time, on the same token, I mean, there's going to be information that he can't share or is unable to share or just doesn't have, right? And so this is one of those moments where we all want to know things. And sometimes the answers just aren't there, and sometimes the answers just can't be provided for us yet. So I am going to provide a full disclaimer just for legal purposes, right, with my YouTube account in the notes, but just be forewarned, I suppose, with that, right? That, yeah, it's just the reality of the situation here. And one last plug, right? Sister Discord server to Junior Resource Investing, community investment server. It's publicly searchable, lots of extremely knowledgeable people. You can find myself and Mark there. And people that actually make, I'll just say there's some pretty intelligent people there too, especially compared to us, right? So anyway, on that note, let's get going here, right? So again, thank you to Scott for appearing on this, and we'll get off to the races here. I've tried to organize questions a little bit just based on content, and I think that one of the most overwhelming questions that people have is regarding Scott, the idea of a sidetrack, which I know you discussed in the webinar, and I think people just wanted a bit more in-depth response regarding it. So I guess, will you, won't you, when? And then maybe not, if you can't even give a concrete answer, could you just describe to us the rationale or the pros and cons of sidetracking now or sidetracking after Baobab as a third drill?
Sure. So yeah, firstly, Matt and Mark, thanks for having me once again, and appreciate you giving me some time and a platform to have some additional questions answered from our shareholders. I'll just reiterate again that to go along with your forward-looking statements, a lot of this is still early in the piece. We've only just got the data in the last couple of days. Some of it we're still working through, and some of it we still got to integrate and finalize the thinking around it, and then make decisions. So some of this, as you said, may be fluid, and we've got to put everything in context, and then I think whoever Galaxy S8 Plus, maybe just mute him.
Yeah, done.
There we go. I'd rather see your face than a blank screen, Matt. So we've got to finish integrating the data. We've still got another whole section to go now, and we'll start. I haven't looked at my screen yet, so I'm free to chat. We've got real-time data that gets streamed in from the rig, but I haven't logged in and had a look at it this morning. So we should be drilling out of the shoe at the moment, and then we'll be into the next whole section. So back to the question on the sidetrack for the 200, where this is located, and this 200 horizon is roughly, let's call it 800 meters for easy numbers. The shoe for that section is at 593, so let's call it 600. So it's a 200 meter window from where we would need to, the top of the potential sidetrack to get to the reservoir. Now, because of that very short radius, trying to step out and get away from this fault plane where we're sitting in that 200 horizon the maximum we could step out from there is about 30 meters from some quick numbers that we've done. So that, whether or not we get far enough away from where we are and we get a slightly better result, we probably want to get a little further away from that. And maybe I'll just share that same presentation. Can you see that?
Looks like it wants to. Yep, there it is.
Okay. So where we are over here, and you can see that these are the bright amplitudes that we were targeting. The well trajectory that we needed to drill to intersect these primary targets through here meant that we had to, in order to keep the deviation of this well to under 35 degrees, so this is at 34, which allows us to run wireline without the use of tractors. So those are the wireline tools we put down on some wheels to help it roll smoothly along the borehole instead of dragging it, which we usually do. Those aren't available at the moment, or you'd have to do what's called pipe conveyed logging. So put the tools on drill pipe, and then you know that's very, very slow. Instead of winching it up on the wireline cable, you've got to put it on drill pipe and you move it up, one stand at a time. So 30 odd meters at a time, which is very slow going, very expensive. So and greater deviation adds greater risk with this as well. So what that meant is that the placement of this 200, which was a late addition into the well plan, originally we were going to drill a more vertical well through here, and we had to change that to try and target these bright amplitudes in a relatively up dip position. So we ended up just being right on the edge of this bright amplitude, and you can see it is much dimmer through here compared to here. And that's meant that, unfortunately, we're just in this fault zone where we've got some poorer reservoir quality. So you can see that degrade through here, and that seems to be the case on these upthrown sections of the fault. So we've got dimming here, dimming there, bit of dimming through there, whereas on this side it's okay. So on this side of the fault, I mean. So to step out and to only get 30 meters, we don't want. Look, the good news is we've got something really exciting to come back to. That's what I'm really pleased about. This is de-risked this substantially, but we don't want to have a similar result again. So sidetracking from the current location would mean we'd only get 30 meters away from where we are now. The scale on this is pretty big. So getting 100, 200 meters away would put us right at the crest of this, and but also well within these bright amplitudes where we think there will be better conventional reservoirs. So it might be a case of us pushing the pad out from where we currently are, but that would mean a new cellar, and just changing the configuration of the pits and shifting the rig. So whether you shift a rig a couple of 100 meters or a couple of kilometers, there's a lot of similar work involved. So trying to get this next penetration in this 200 horizon right is crucial. So we're working up a number of options at the moment to see what we can do, but we haven't concluded whether we'll do it immediately after Baobab or what's going to happen. So there's still a little bit of work. We've obviously got a lot to focus on at the moment with the drilling and going back and looking at our primary targets and managing that operation. So it's not a distraction. We've got we're going to get some help to have a look at some of these options, so that can be run in parallel, so that we can make a decision there.
No, excellent, thank you. I guess a follow-up, if I may, as a natural follow-up here is, people are obviously questioning, if you have what people consider is a fairly high chance of success, could you just describe the rationale or discuss the rationale, pros and cons of stepping out 200 meters, not a step out, but 200 meter out versus pursuing Baobab was the initial idea? What's, internal dialogue as you can share with us, pros and cons of both, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, from again, we've got a number of considerations to balance here. Whether we go straight to Baobab, whether we go and try and drill Mukuyu-1, or if we can get away with a more deviated sidetrack, those are still things to work up, and we've still got to integrate the data that we've got now and see what implications that has for Baobab, whether that provides a greater chance of success at Baobab now that, because we're looking at similar horizons. Again, that's still very early in work that's just begun to try and understand the implications. So our geos and geophysicists are working away now and having a look. I think probably one of the good things that's come out of this first result for Mukuyu is the amount of clay and seal in the system. One of the big concerns that we had going into this initially, because everyone said, if you read all the literature, that this basin is very sandy, and people look at the stratigraphic column that we've got in, and that's just based off mobile, and the rocks at the surface haven't changed from when mobile studied them to when we studied them. So redrawing that stratigraphic column hasn't been an option. It's certainly going to get redrawn now, because there's a lot more clay in the system. But to get a competent formation through this shallow section that would then provide us enough of a pore pressure window to get down in a single casing string down to where roughly we are now. So we were concerned that we'd get a low leak off test, weak formation because it's sandy, and that would limit the pore pressure window that we could drill in, and we would have had to, TD this section somewhere over here because we would have run out of that window. But that has certainly changed. And so for Baobab, which was a similar 3-string design, we'll now be able to do a 2-string design and drill Baobab to TD in the 12.25 inch hole, which means that we're saving a whole section and like 10 days on the well. So that's also been a great. So we're redoing that well design at the moment and redoing everything for Baobab. So that's had a good implication for Baobab from a well design point of view, from a geological point of view. That work still needs to be done. So.
Excellent. So yeah, just data is collected but not yet analyzed. So the actual.
That's right. Still, yeah.
Perfect. So that was what it's obviously in everybody's mind. We're all clamoring for a declaration, right? So I mean, naturally speaking, I'm sure you are too. It's part of the process as patients, even though it's difficult sometimes. But a lot of questions obviously about the 200 horizon here as well. Some of these are shorter than others. So I'm just going to kind of rip through these a little bit, but so 10 to 50 meter column, is that what you were expecting to encounter, or how does that compare to what you were expecting prior to drilling?
Yeah, so look, it's probably, from where the resistivity starts to jag back, it's the sand itself is probably 25 meters thick, but it's got some tighter stuff where there's no resistivity response, both at the top and the base. So further away and a little bit more into these brighter amplitudes, we're expecting that to increase. So
here, I can see
that would mean so our pre-drill estimate was roughly 20 meters, and that's a sort of typical net pay that you see in these type of depositional environments. If you go back and look at some of the presentations we've done and looking at the Lockachar Basin and the Albertine Graben, you're typically seeing those sort of net columns, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 meters. So that's roughly in line with what what we expected,
Okay.
and what the volumetric estimates were based on as well.
Good, good. It's anticipating another question coming down soon. So then, another question here, of course, all these are kind of natural questions, but how do these results then impact the outlook for the shallower basin margin projects and leads, prospects, pardon me, and leads? How does this impact those?
Yeah, well, we've got, I might just skip back to this map here. So with Baobab, we've got, and some of the other basin margin ones through here, that's obviously from the 200 horizon, something that looks interesting. We've got also bright amplitudes in those sections, which again look very interesting, and one of the reasons that we're chasing it. But moving further to the east through here, we really like the implications for some of these other leads that we've had here, and Makabel, Musumu, and Mopani, which have got these very, very interesting flat spots. Makabel's got this beautiful flat spot and velocity change. It's all contained within that horizon. You can see it on a colored chart. You can see the velocity change within it, or color display rather. You can see that velocity change coincident with structure in Makabel and Musumu and Mopani. So we like that implication for these ones further to the east. And then obviously the basin margin, we've got similar stratigraphy, but we've also got what we believe is additional source rock at the base, which is only present on the flanks through here because of the structure of this basement high trend. So you can see that through here in these warmer colors. That's where the basement high is. And then we've got so it's like a saddle through this basement high trend through here, where you've got the troughs in through here. And we've got an additional unit, the 380, where that looks like lacustrine deposits, which are going to be a combination of source and reservoir, and that's where these are a little bit different as well. So it does have good implications, but again, there is some independence of this basin margin play as well.
So how much, this is a follow-up question, I think you maybe already answered this, but I guess just to ask it directly, is how much de-risking or how much of an increase in chance of success does these results kind of play out in terms of Mukuyu and then also basin margin? I mean, how much more, I mean, maybe put another way, is how is your confidence impacted based on these results?
So the basin margin, it's too early to tell at this stage. For Mukuyu, obviously our primary risk that's been identified, and it's not just us, it's everyone who's done any evaluation of this acreage has been seal. That's always been the concern. It's too sandy. You're not going to have good enough seals to prevent the leakage of hydrocarbons. So this huge thick seal that we've seen in through here, I mean, that's a big thick regional seal, and this bland seismic in through here compared to we're getting a lot more variation through here, and that's sand and shale coming and going, and a different depositional environment. But this is obviously bodes well for this deeper section, because that's always been the primary risk. And because we've got so much seal as well, what we're looking at here, the risk is, and with the faulting, is that you may have had seal, but it's faulted, and then you've moved one section of seal, and you might have sand on sand juxtaposition instead of sand on seal juxtaposition, which allows the hydrocarbons to escape and migrate up. And where we have seal through here, we've got huge thick shale in through here and on this side of the fault as well. So even though we've had faulting through here, there's still seal on seal. So there's no escape path for this, to come up and disappear into up the faults. So yeah, it's been a very good development seeing this huge thick regional shale above these primary targets. So increased our confidence in this next hole section.
Excellent. And honestly, that the questions about seal, I mean, that was the primary risk involved for this play, right? One of the primary risks that we had to, one of those unanswered questions. I guess, Mark, I'm gonna, on the fly here, Mark, do you want to skip down to the questions 12 and just discuss seal with him a little bit? I mean, we're on the topic, so we may as well just transition here.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, because exactly as you say, Scott. I mean, the seal above the primary targets was what you really felt was the biggest risk. And now with that sort of data, what do you think in terms of seal presence and efficacy? And look at that as a risk factor.
Yeah. So now, I mean, that's well and been truly put to bed. This particularly above these primary targets. I think what's also important now is we've got cross-fault seal through here with whatever this material is in through here. That's what we're seeing sealing up against the faults. So we're not and if it didn't seal, we wouldn't have seen the resistivity response to the separation, the resistivity through here. It would have been residual, and it would have been sitting, the shallow, medium, and deep resistivity would have been sitting on top of each other. So we've got cross-fault seal through here, we've got top seal in through here, and then we've got obviously top seal through here, and because we've got seal on seal juxtaposition across the fault, we've got cross-fault seal through here as well. So it's from a seal point of view, we're a lot happier and a lot more confident, and a big primary risk taken off the table.
Yeah. Well, that's it. You've taken out my next question. It was going to be about above the post-standing seal. So you already talked about that. So something that people I think is still interested in. There's different views on where you've gone through 200, and when you talk about the type formation, is the question mark about what gives you the confidence that we're going to see something that is better characteristics of the formation as you move away from the fault.
Well, it's really and again we've got to now go and integrate the velocity data that we've got from the sonic data. So sonic data is a log that you run which uses sine waves similar to seismic. That gives us very detailed information and the speed of sound that travels through these rocks to help calibrate our seismic data. So that's what we're seeing and these responses through here is that these brights are behaving pretty well, and we can see that with the change in character in the seismic, it's reflecting better quality sands of what we have. So you can see in that little bright through there that we haven't tied these logs yet properly, but because this is displaying on a TVD subsea map, we've got it again. This is all very, very early, so we've got good quality sands that correspond to these bright amplitudes through here, and the reflectivity that we see through here. So you can see this dim seismic through here. That's all shale. We've got some interest through there. So we think that away from the fault where we see this dimming. So this is this top horizon through here. You can see it's disappeared, but we've got a really nice sand above here, and we can see that from the cuttings that we've got. We've still got some bright amplitude in through there against the fault plane, but not here.
Yes,
and that's where the quality is degraded. So moving out of at the top of this horizon through here, this purple horizon that we picked, moving it into the brighter amplitude, we believe that we're going to see better reservoir quality.
Yeah. Okay. There's also now there was the discussion about how well some of the downhole tools and stuff have performed, and how you've managed to get some recordings. Couple of techie questions on some bits and pieces.
Sure.
So first one, did you include was there a sonic log used to calibrate the seismic results?
So we're doing that now. So we've only just got the data.
Right. Okay.
A few days ago. That's got to get processed, and then we've got to feed it back through through our time to depth calibrations and processing workflows. So that is being done at the moment, and we will be running a VSP, which is what's called a vertical seismic profile, where we've got receivers that we put down the hole instead of at surface, and we've still got we've got the source at the surface, and we every 25, 50 meters, depending on your parameters, you'll drag the receivers up the hole whilst you're activating your source, and that will give you, for that interval, a really good calibration of what your surface seismic is giving you. So that'll come at the end of the well when we'll do VSP.
You're going to wait for full TD before you're going to do that.
That's right. We didn't see the need to run one in this section of the hole. It was a contingency to run it in case we were wildly off, but our picks so far of where things have come in from a depth perspective have been pretty good. They've been within our kind of margin of error so far.
Yeah.
So we didn't feel the need to run a VSP in this whole section. It wouldn't have told us a lot more about this next whole section coming up. So
no, I think everyone's keen to get to the bottom.
So, and then with the other tools, we have had some issues, and these things do happen. You don't have the MWD tools and the wireline tools are very sophisticated. They've got a lot of electronics. There's a lot of different parts in them, and communicating, and they can be configured in different combinations, so they get broken down and put together. They're quite long strings, some of them, depending on how many you put together. Sometimes up to 60 meters long. For a tool string. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and you've got temperature, pressure, fluids that can all result in one part of the tool not working. So the plan for this whole section through here was to run resistivity, so on the MWD, so that we've got gamma ray, which is what you see in this log through here. So gamma ray differentiates between sand and shale, and then that sits about a few meters behind the bit, the drill bit. So you see that pretty quickly, and then behind that we would have had the resistivity tool. So that failed, unfortunately, before we put it in the hole. And sometimes it happens, but the backups, what's been disappointing is the backups that we'd ordered, and we're told were there, hadn't even been shipped. So that handicapped us a little bit from a perspective of being able to evaluate what we were going through in real time. All we could see was the gamma ray and the cuttings. So the mud gas system's been faulty as well, so we don't have any reliable mud gas data for this whole section. And the MWD, which would have given us that resistivity, so the resistivity which would have given us the saturation indications of different fluid types, we would have seen the same thing that we did from the wireline. So we would have been in a much better position ahead of the wireline run. If we had the mud gas as well, and in an even better position to be a bit more proactive rather than reactive, waiting for the wireline logging results. It doesn't change your wireline logging results. It just helps you plan ahead, and maybe we would have made it another decision to try and change tack with this 200. we could have logged that earlier, but again, the wireline gear wasn't ready. We were still waiting for stuff to arrive. So it hasn't been the best performance from our service provider. And we've been, the data acquisition program that we planned hasn't exactly played out. But we've got everything that we need for this next whole section. And so, hopefully all of these tools hold up, and we'll have much better visibility going through these primary targets. So resistivity, mud gas. So they've had some techs out there to fix the mud logging unit, and also this is a different size hole section, and we've got a different tool for the resistivity. So
yeah, I mean, that's going to be the next question, seeing that the order kit's working. So when you go down to your lower horizons, well, as long as it stays working anyway, everything's fixed.
As long as it stays working, so it's being tested at surface, it's passed, and when we start drilling, that's typically you find out relatively quickly, and sometimes the vibration from drilling, or they pulse on. Sometimes if they're going to fail, they fail early. So if we've got good signs all the way, for the next few hours or day or so with the tools, then we'll be in a good position. So it'll give us the real-time data that we've been, that we've designed, and for a data acquisition purpose to help us and guide our decision making.
Okay, so I mean, just a little bit of a wild card bit on the side of this. Does where you've managed to go and set your casing at the moment, because you were confident with how the clay and shell is, and been able to get a good foundation for your casing. Is there any potential in your mind of going down to the lower angler?
Yeah, well, again, one of the good things about this well so far has been the mud system and the hole condition. Again,
yep.
You never know, because obviously this is the first well in the basin. There's no calibration on what the clays will do and how they react, because we're using water-based mud. So often with water-based mud, what happens is it comes into contact with the clays and then they swell. And that causes sticking. The clay swell inside your borehole, and what you've drilled from a hole size perspective then starts to narrow, and so that can create sticky spots and tight spots for your either your drill pipe to squeeze through, and sometimes it continues swelling as there's more and more time going on. So the mud has been very, very good, and the performance of it, we've had a handful of tight spots and very little overpull when so that's been good, and the friction factors have been much lower than we anticipated as well. So one of the limitations that you have when you're drilling is the hook load of the rig. So at the drill works, you've got the ability for the hook load and the force that it can apply and physically pull. So that's the weight of your drill pipe with all of the tools on it. So once you get down to the bottom here, your drill pipe gets heavier and heavier as you add more stands onto it, and your limit then becomes what you can pull up, and that's dictated by the weight of the string and the friction factors as you're pulling it, particularly in deviated hole, up towards the surface. So the friction factors have been lower, the hole's been in better condition, so we think we'll be able to push on a little bit further than we initially anticipated. So we're going to keep going until we can't go anymore, and then we've still got the option, if we're still seeing good results, we can go down to a smaller hole size, so we can put a 7-inch liner in here and then drill out 6-inch hole, because then your friction factor, once you've cased it, so the inside of steel casing compared to the friction factor of open borehole is much lower, and so that again that resets your friction factor, and so that allows you to drill out a little bit more. So we'll see how we go. So yeah, there's the possibility, but we've got to be mindful of the hole conditions in this next section, and hopefully it behaves in a similar manner as what we've had so far.
Okay, and sort of again a little bit linked to other areas and what we're looking at in drilling. So when you mentioned that the in the Dande you said there was nothing commercial, but there was potentially residual. Does that seem to give you more confidence when you're looking at the Dande across the rest of the prospect?
Oh, so when I'm sorry, I didn't mean. I think there's been a misunderstanding. So what we've seen in here is not residual through here.
No.
This, if it was residual, we wouldn't have had the separation in the resistivity.
Yep.
So it's just very tight reservoir, and so low porosity, but not residual, because residual is a low gas saturation, which
Yes.
gives you a more elevated resistivity compared to your baseline of water-filled pore space, but separation in it, and we have big separation between the shallow and the deep reading resistivity, means you've got a different phase inside your pore space than brine-filled pore. So what I think what I meant in my previous statement is that related to the seal, that because of the separation, it's not residual, it's not escaping.
Correct.
So we've got this cross-fault seal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, so in some of these others, again, it's early still. We may have seen little hints of it through these sections, which means we've had some migration from somewhere. We've got to figure out where that's coming from and whether it's a different, again, we don't know until we get into this primary section through here, where we know we've got source rock in the Angua, where this has come from. So again, this feeds into Baobab, if it's coming from the flanks, if it's coming from deeper up, the section we're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, it sounds good that you got a position where you got something you recognise within the 200. You've got below that is a terrific seal over the lower formations, and that's that's a good view to get into. I think my last bit will be I'm probably going to go back and test your time at university to see how technically savvy you still are. Is will you be able to think you can use the existing well data for any quantitative interpretation and rock physics models to
definitely that's
in the well?
Yeah. Look, we won't have that ability to turn that around now to help steer where we're going now.
No, future ones is now. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's part of the work that will be coming once we've logged the entire this whole section through here, and then we've got the VSP data as well. We'll go back and be able to calibrate all the rock physics and get a much better understanding of what these amplitudes are telling us, and that will be, we're getting so much data out of this well that it's going to enable us to calibrate the seismic across the rest of the basin. So yes, that work will be done, but that takes a bit of time. It's not something that you turn around in days or even weeks. It's
no, good Lord. And I think my last bit before we get you back on to Matt is going to be, so in terms of just thinking through some of the general sequence for the well, are you looking to work your way through to TD, then run your wireline, do your VSP, and then release results? Or how are you thinking about releasing information back to the market? Will you get to TD and say, hey, we've seen some stuff, then we're going to run wireline? Or will you run everything and then get back? What's your thinking?
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, I only like to release results once we've had the wireline data, because you've got a full suite of data, which then gives you a complete picture.
Sure.
Although we've got MWD and resistivity and gamma ray and mud gas when those things are all working, which will give you a good indication. It's not finite. So you can, I mean, you see this with other companies who've drilled through. They've announced that they've had shows, and then they wireline log it, and there's nothing movable. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to elevate expectations in that sense, and then rug pull everyone once the wireline data comes in, because that's not helpful. In my view. So the plan for this whole section had been we had to drill over balance because we were and really over balance because we were concerned about the pore pressure regime and a large column through here, and with the gas buoyancy effect and hydrostatic gradient at shallow depths. That means your potential pore pressure within these gas saturated sands is significantly greater. Mm-hmm. And then we were going to wireline log this this bit through here in what's called a chicken run, because the longer that your mud is in the hole, the more risk that you add on. We didn't know how the clays were going to react, and from a sampling point of view, getting that early in the bag would have just set us up really, really well for the rest of the well. Calmed a lot of nerves. Mm-hmm. We didn't have that opportunity in this well. One, because we didn't have the MWD resistivity working, the mud gas system wasn't working, and so we didn't have any information until we TD'd and then we wireline logged this section. So when people were complaining that we hadn't released any results, we didn't have any results. We didn't see anything. We couldn't tell anything. So you can get some indications from MWD, but I'm always a little bit reluctant to put any weight on MWD until you've got wireline. And at the end of the day, as I stated, you have to get a hydrocarbon sample to surface to declare a discovery. Mm-hmm. That's what the ASX rules are. So SPE, under the SPE, so Society of Petroleum Engineers, PRMS, Petroleum Resource Management System, it has to be movable hydrocarbons. The only way you can prove movable hydrocarbons is through getting a formation sample with your downhole wireline tools, or well testing. Yeah. And bring it to surface. Not shows, not logs. You've got to get a sample. And so that's where a lot of, I'm not going to get into other company bashing, but that's where a lot of them fall down and make these pronouncements, and they're not actually valid. So
hats off for your ethics anyway. That's what I say.
Yeah, look, I think probably does us a disservice from a sentiment point of view, but we play everything with a straight bat, and we're not going to push this further than we're allowed to from the ASX rules, and from from an industry perspective, and the SPE PRMS system, which is what we report under. So
okay. So you're going to drill down, maybe go into lower Angler, see how you feel. You're going to TD wherever it is, above or below lower Angler. Then you're going to run your wireline and give us an update.
We'll log this entire section through here.
Yep. So
also to wireline log each individual sand, it's not ideal either, because to do that you've got to pull your drill pipe out of the hole. You've got to wrap all of it back. You've then got to set up for wireline, run the tools in the hole, do the logs. And logging it, actually physically moving it through the wellbore, doesn't take a long time. for this first run with those with the grandstand that we ran, that took like 6 hours, but it takes you 48 hours overall to do that. By the time you probably 48 60 hours, something like that, for that process. So you don't want to, and then you got to get back on bottom again and start drilling.
Of course.
So it's more efficient to do it by whole section.
Yeah,
So,
and it doesn't make you friends with the drillers, getting them to put it in.
The drillers are okay. It's the poor floormen who've got to make and break up joints all the time.
Exactly.
And it's all rig time at the end of the day as well. So now for us to trip into the hole where if we started at surface with the drill bit at surface, excluding making up all the various bottom hole assemblies. So the bottom hole assemblies, your drill bit, your MWD tools, your collars, and everything else. So just running it in the hole to get to bottom, at the moment, that takes anywhere between 8, 10, 12 hours, depending on how it's going. And it's a lot of work. So yeah, it's not a decision that you make lightly, because a round trip just to do that, is 24 hours. So that's an entire day's worth of rig time that's lost, plus all of the setup for everything else. So you don't just wireline log willy-nilly, and you pay charges every time you run a tool in the hole. You're getting charged. So you've got a run charge, and then you've got a time in the hole charge as well. So
So you think you got a couple of weeks to go to get to TD, and then maybe a week or so after that is about the ability to give some update on how wireline's gone, do you think?
Yeah, it depends on how extensive our wireline logging program is. We've got a kind of similar length hole section to log here, roughly. So that means but longer running times. Sampling takes a while, depending on how many you're getting, and pressure sampling as well depends on how many sands you have, how many reservoir intervals you log, how many pressure samples you take, and how many samples and how quickly they can clean up as well. So when you're taking, and maybe just to talk about why we elected not to go and take pressure samples and try and get a fluid sample out of here. So because we're drilling with such overbalanced mud, what ends up happening is the weight and the pressure of the mud in your wellbore is a lot greater than what it is in your reservoir. So as you're drilling, you're forcing that drilling fluid into your pore space, right? Because it's got nowhere else to go. And because we're so overbalanced, what that does is it squeezes in a lot of mud filtrate into the pores. And when you're pressure sampling, you're trying to get, and when it's tight, you can't disperse that pressure and that fluid far enough away from the immediate area around your wellbore, because it's tighter rock and it can't flow away as easily into the greater reservoir area. So you end up having additional pressure in your pore space compared to the virgin pressure of the reservoir. So to try and get a valid pressure, you've got to get your probe to sit on your borehole wall and get a good seal, and that's only possible if you've got good reservoir quality. And then you've got to withdraw. You use the pump to withdraw fluid out of the reservoir, out of the side of the borehole, and then you let it build up, so that pressure response comes back from the reservoir, and that tells you then what your reservoir pressure is. With that additional mud weight in the hole, and the hole had been exposed by this stage in this horizon for probably 10, 12 days, something like that. And we would have had an effect, what's called supercharging, where you're not seeing the reservoir pressure, you're seeing the invasion pressure of the the drilling fluid that's in your near wellbore area.
Yeah.
So it's not a valid pressure. So that doesn't allow you to tell you what your fluid gradient is. So gas-filled pore space compared to water-filled pore space, you get a different fluid density in your pore space, and that gives you that's how you estimate your column heights from your pressure gradient you get through your reservoir. So we wouldn't have been able to get that and prove the fluid gradient. And then the second thing from a sampling point of view is that to sample your hydrocarbon fluids, you've got to clean up and clean away all of that mud, that drilling mud filtrate from the reservoir to get a virgin fluid sample. And that, because we didn't have good reservoir, the ability to pump all of that drilling fluid that you forced into the pore space takes a really long time. And we would have been sitting on the wall pumping and we wouldn't have been able to clean it up sufficiently to get a good enough sample to take. And it also increases your risk of differential sticking, because the weight of the drilling mud in your wellbore compared to your reservoir is a lot greater, and it ends up pushing the tool up against the reservoir, and it gets stuck because of the pressure differential. And not only the tool against the borehole wall, but the cable that you're running it on, any other reservoir further up here that's exposed with the cable, that can also get pushed against the wall and get stuck. So the risk of doing that was much too great, and would have added on, one, a lot of time, two, a lot of risk, and three, whether we would have got a fluid sample, I doubt it. If we'd had a dual packer out there, which are these big inflatable packers, so the probes that I'm talking about are, probably as long as my finger that you're putting against the borehole wall, and then it's got these seals around that to push it against the wall to try and get contact. With a dual packer, you've got these inflatable packers, and you can space them 2 meters apart, which gives you a much greater surface area, and you can pump out over a much bigger area to try and get a valid pressure. So if we had those, we would have gone in and tried to do it, and I think we would have been there. But with the conventional probes that we've had available, the risk versus reward, unfortunately, just wasn't in our favor.
Yeah, I agree. I think, look, you made a sensible. You've got something you can go back and have a look at the 200, but you've kept your set.
Yeah.
It's not worth risking the world, risking the equipment and what have you.
Yeah.
Your primary targets to aim for.
Yeah. So what would have ended up happening then is we would have had to, if we couldn't fish the tool out, we then would have had to push it all the way to the bottom of the hole, and then cement. Because we've got a run casing, we then have to cement it up, and then we've got a sidetrack out of there. Which means we would have messed up the trajectory that we'd set ourselves for these primary targets as well, and a lost and hold charge for the tool, the extra time to push to the bottom, to sidetrack it. The costs and the risk were just too great to roll the dice on that. So but
no, I agree with you.
So this next hole section that we're drilling, though, is much more normally, we're drilling with a normal sort of overbalance, which reduces that risk of having that differential sticking issue, because as you get deeper, that gas buoyancy effect lessens, and so we're not as concerned about the pore pressure regime deeper compared to where this initial risk in the 200 horizon sat.
Yeah, because that was another question about, when you're going deeper, are you going to be winding back on your mud weight? But obviously, and you just said yes.
So we gradually wound this back. So we drilled this with 13.5 pounds per gallon mud, which is hugely overbalanced. and at the bottom of this whole section, we began to wind it back to about 12, which is still, still pretty heavy, 12 and a half, I think. So this will be drilled with, and your hydrostatic is about 9.98 parts per gallon. So, or 9.8, I beg your pardon. So we were 50% overbalance, which is a lot. And if you convert that to a normal pressure set of a fluid density, it's a big differential. So we're in a much better space for this next whole section.
Ah, all good. So look, you passed your exam in terms of technical questions from me. Well done, mate. It's good. It's good work. We spent hours pulling all these together, and you've only got a few minutes to try and remember the answer. So well done. So I'll get you over to Matt, who's going to. I think you're going to talk about future drilling. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions around present and future drilling. Obviously. There's frustration, and I mean mistakes happen, and such as life is imperfect. But yeah, there's frustration around what people would consider avoidable errors based on how the drilling is gone. And I guess could you speak to what can you do, what will you do, what are your options in terms of kind of preventative measures to avoid that happening again?
So, I guess I'll ask the question first. What are the perceived preventable errors?
Frustrations with the service provider, I guess. Yeah, that's questions that were brought in. So I don't want to sit here and badmouth anybody, right? But yeah, just the questions that came.
Look, I don't either. It has been frustrating, and hasn't been the level of service from a major provider that you'd expect. Things happen. You never have a. It doesn't matter where you are. You never have perfect performance. You always expect breakdowns and failures of tools. These are complicated operations, and there's so many moving parts. And these things happen, and you've got to deal with it as they come along. But we have now taken we've had to go back and reconfirm everything and not take people at their word about what's there, what's not, what's available, and also our logistics guys have been fantastic in mobilizing stuff and in getting it done and coordinating it and taking it on themselves. Our drilling team and everyone involved has been outstanding. I've been involved in other campaigns before in other wells, and if we'd had these sort of challenges with the less experienced team, this could have gone very sideways. But we've got excellent people out there, very experienced, and we've also had a lot of, we knew this going into a frontier region, never been done before in the country. Basin's never been drilled before, so trying to get everything perfect with this first well was never going to happen. But we put in place the contingency plans and the mitigations and thought about everything so that we could reasonably deal with anything that was going to be thrown our way. So it hasn't been perfect, but so far everyone's doing a good job on our team, and I'm really happy how everyone has performed. So we've done as much as we can. We're in good shape for this next whole section. Things also weren't going to go smoothly from the start. It was always going to be a slow start. A lot of teething issues. The service companies ever worked with that rig provider before. The new people, new crew, particularly the foreman, getting used to how the rig works and everything else. So we've gotten a lot quicker. So I'll give you an example. When we drilled this first hole section through here, the time to install the casing and cement it, that was about a week, and that was a relatively shallow depth. This is 593 meters to here. For this section through here, we ran casing and cemented it within 2.5 days, and that was a longer section, deeper. So everyone's now getting into the groove. Everything's arrived at site. So you plan, you put in place mitigation, and then you've also got to react to what goes on, because you're always going to get surprises. It doesn't matter if you're drilling in a known basin. I mean, we've seen this in Australia. You always get surprises when you're drilling, because it's deep, it's dark. No one knows what is going on downhole with absolute certainty. And you've always got imperfect information. So you've just got to react the best that you can, plan as well as you can. And that's made harder by, again, being the first well in the basin. But yeah, look, certainly keeping on top of our service providers. And I've had to step in a few times and escalate stuff. And that's what my job is, not to tell our guys. Our guys are very experienced. I don't need to tell them what to do. It's to help them. If any doors need to be kicked in, if anything needs to be escalated, then that's what I'm there for. So,
and webinars.
Not to sit up and yeah, and webinars when I can speak.
So what's, I guess, maybe a follow-up question just for curiosity's sake. What is your relationship with the service provider at this point? I mean, the dialogue that's happening, the conversations you're having, the tone and tenor of the relationship.
Yeah, look, it's good. They obviously see this as a huge prize on success. There'll be a lot of activity after this, and from a reputational point of view, they obviously want to get things right. They want to provide us with a good service, and we're not there to be a policeman and say, this is what you said you would do. We, at the end of the day, we need to get the data that we need, and we need to help them do that in any way possible. So, when I was out there, I had to call in some favors to source the last 2 bottles of hydrogen gas in the country to help get the mud gas system calibrated, because their hydrogen generators broke down. So I was running around to do it and throwing it to them and say, this is your job. You guys sort it out. That's not going to help us. It's ultimately we are going to pay the price. So it's in our interest to help them along. It's the first time they've been in the country as well, so they don't know how everything works, and trying to get stuff in and out at short notice is also hard because of the remote location and the paperwork that's required. So yeah, look, the relationship is good. Everyone's working together to make this a success. So,
similar question here, just about around future drilling prospects. What's your how long do you have the rig contracted for? Where are we at here?
So for the contract point of view, we've got it till the end of this campaign from a contract perspective. But we've got a good relationship with Exalo. They're looking hopefully for a longer term contract out here, and they haven't got any confirmed work after our campaign. And even if we finish up, it looks like the rig is going to sit there for a little while until it gets demobilized or mobilized elsewhere. So we've still got the ability to extend the contract or not, or bring something else in, whatever we think is going to suit us best going forward. So,
but yeah, you have flexibility, and they're not running off to some other site. Yeah, okay. I guess what are the steps removed? So, let's say, a few months from now, you complete Baobab, you want to do 3, 4, 5, whatever, finances dependent, obviously. What is there left? What are the steps between now and drilling well 3?
Well, location, firstly. so that will, you've obviously got to pick. It's not like throwing darts at a dartboard. Build the pad, and maybe we can convince them that we don't need concrete footings for the rig. That's one of the long lead times on well pads for us is the curing of the concrete footings. The cellars okay, but and then any consumables that we need, drilling mud, mud chemicals, cement, and also depending on the well design and the depth, whatever's left in terms of tubulars, so casing as well. And then if it's a longer term campaign, you're looking at things like wellheads and everything else. So it will ultimately depend on the results as to what the next steps are, which well it's going to be, and then how many will follow on after that, and whether you keep the same rig, bring in a different one, if it needs to be bigger, if it needs to be smaller. This one, and we've had this discussion already internally. Sol have been doing pretty well, so and we're happy with them. So that's unlikely to change, but it depends on what we see.
And potentially, I mean, that third well could be going back into the 200 again. Is that right? Or
yeah,
whether that's after Baobab or whether you do it before Baobab?
Yeah, and then it also depends on what your next target is. So, for example, if we were just to repeat this, we may have ended up drilling the vertical well like we planned originally, which would have been over here.
Yeah,
we would have still hit those targets where we in the kind of ellipses. So we've got ellipses for these targets and where we want to hit the stuff and a radius that we want to plant it in. So yeah, it's it depends on, you want to try and get as much information out of a well as possible, and so trying to line up and these stacked objectives was going to give us the best chance of bang for our buck. But you've got to be mindful of risk and your execution as well. If we'd gone too aggressive and try to get too deviated, there's a chance we might not have been able to get the wireline tools down because we could pipe convey them. That's hard work and expensive because it's a lot more rig time than running wireline. And then it just depends on, it's going to depend on what our results are in these primary targets through here and what we prioritize for follow-up wells.
Just for clarification, that's your rig behind you, isn't it? On your
so this is I took this when I was out there a few weeks ago, and beautiful sunsets out there at the moment, and sunrises. It's very hazy though. You might have seen some of the videos that we put up on our social media. So you're not getting great clear skies, and when you're out there, you can barely even see the escarpment on most days because of all the dust in the air, because it's right at the end of the dry season, and a lot of smoke in the air as well now. People clearing agricultural sand, or soil rather, beg your pardon, farmland for the planting season coming up. So burning all the husks away. Amazing.
Our guys that are monitoring the satellite images have said the Baobab well pad's coming on pretty well.
Yeah, it is. It's a much smaller pad, so we're keeping the camp at Mukuyu,
Yeah.
and it's just the rig pad and the mini camp that are going to go to the next site. So
Another question here, returning back to future drilling, I guess. So questions about lead time. What's the expectations for lead time? And I guess maybe the ultimate thrust of the question is, after 2, presuming that there's going to be 3, 4, etc. Will there be downtime in between there, or are you hoping to demob and move on as quickly as you can?
It's hard to say. We've got to go and see what's available from a long lead time and consumable side of things. It's not a straightforward equation at the moment with supply chain, and particularly in the oil field, where we're seeing a lot of shortages from, and also huge cost escalation for tubulars in particular. So that's casing, and it's that will depend on what we need and what we can get a hold of. So and the lead times for that shipping at the moment is also a bit of an issue. So there's been 1, the availability of them, and then 2, also some of the industrial action that's going on in South Africa and Mozambique at the moment hampers the ability to get stuff in and out in a timely manner if it's coming in by ship. So that, yeah, we've got to figure that out and see what's available. But we don't want to move now and start prematurely ordering stuff before we've got results out of here, and we know exactly what's going to be needed. So.
And you're leaving the hole open from this casing point down?
That will depend on what we encounter.
Yep.
The most likely scenario is we will run 7-inch liner.
Okay.
Because if we're going to come back and do a well test, we don't want to leave drilling mud in the hole exposed. For it degrades. So what we will most likely do is run a 7-inch liner through this, cement it, and then you put in a couple of plugs, retrievable plugs, in through here, and then you come back when you're ready and you perforate it.
Yeah. And
then you flow test it. So we'll displace that back to brine, or very low mud weight. So we're not getting we haven't got heavy mud sitting in the hole for a long time. So, and also you don't want to leave exposed open hole for ages with we can put a plug up here which would do that, but it's that's not best practice either. So we don't want and also the risk of your open hole degrading, leaving it for such a long time exposed, also increases. So running a liner and then come back and perforate it and test it at another date.
Just a couple, thank you, Scott. A couple of final questions from me, and then I'll let Mark have a final crack at it here too. This is something that's been discussed in previous months, but I guess just for the sake of maybe keeping people up to date, again, presuming commercial discovery, right? So again, obviously a very forward-looking statement here, but is your priority to move to cash flow from Mukuyu, or whichever that discovery is your priority to turn that into cash flow as quickly as possible, or are you going to keep drilling and keep exploring prior to production?
It's an interesting question. Getting to that commerciality threshold is obviously a good prize, but then whether you go and try and build up your resource base and try and extend the play further out here or further along here also has its benefits from a from a point of view that once your basins and your play's been de-risked, that running room opens up and can add significantly, and it's a factor of what does it cost me to drill a well versus what is to extend the play or to go back to this map. To get this to a commercial threshold, how many appraisal wells will we have to drill in here versus if we, go and put an exploration well in here or here, the inference that this entire fairway then works is also quite powerful. So although you're not likely to get from one well, and then if you go to let's say 2 wells in here, and then moving out here, are you better off moving this to some kind of contingent category or proving up this contingent category in this prospect here? I don't know. We're going to have to see what the data tells us as well.
That'd be a lovely problem to have again.
Absolutely. So, but ultimately, we'd like to do both and try to do it in a cost-effective manner. So, again, luckily we're on shore, and once we've made a discovery, then an actual discovery, not a where we sit now on the verge. That means it gives us a lot of flexibility and optionality as well. And there's also now with the way that these permits have played out, that we've got the ability to slice and dice this differently as well and bring in partners for specific things and leave them out of others. So that's another layer on top of that.
Is Stuart getting out there often?
No, he was out there a few months ago before we started, but no, he's not out there. Again, it's not. I like being out there because I love being. I can't help myself but get involved in drilling it. It's great being out at the well site and at the coalface. I'm not, I can't help anyone out there.
Well, except getting gas bottles and stuff.
Well, even then, it's I could have done that from here, but it's more just I guess being out there in the thick of it. I'm not useful out there from I'm taking up a bed, quite frankly, but it's just nice to be out there when everything's going on. And be able to watch and physically look at the cuttings when it's coming up, sitting and being in the mudlogging unit or being in the wireline truck, which is where I usually sit when we're logging, and looking over the engineer's shoulder and seeing the data as it's being gathered.
So that's the question. Are you gonna get back out there for the wireline after TD? Are you going to be there as it comes through?
Unlikely. I've just gotten back now in the last few days, and I'm heading back over next month. So
right.
So yeah,
okay.
Just the way that the timing's worked out, I've had limited windows to do that. So yeah, it's nice to be out there, but from that perspective, Stuart and myself, we're not going to change anything by being out there. It's just more to give the guys out there some visibility that this is important. We're there to help everyone succeed. If they need anything, give them that agency that if they need something that they can speak up. They don't need to be worried about implications of anything. Everyone's there for this to succeed, and that was the overwhelming feeling that I got out there. Everyone is willingness and wishing it to to succeed from from every angle. So
yeah. I mean, other things on the timeline, just out the top of my mind. So, we said a couple of weeks to get to TD, maybe likely, a week or two to get your wireline in, and then perhaps you'll be back out in country, because there was talk about Ed doing a visit and tying in with that was the PPSA sort of timing. What are you looking at? Those sort of things?
So that visit will coincide, for good news, and we were very close to pulling the trigger, but I think obviously from a perspective where no one's going to put themselves in a position where they're standing there and with uncertain results ahead of them, and that being used in a negative fashion. So yeah, that visit will happen, with success in this low horizon. So that's on standby.
So that's a Thanksgiving sort of getting almost just before Christmas sort of
hopefully long before Christmas.
Yeah. I'm just mean in December. That's all I'm saying.
One final thing from me here, and this is I sometimes feel like I end up being a representative for retail here, and this is less a question and more just a request, I guess. But just lots of discussions on retail boards, people wishing that they would have a chance or opportunity to be involved in financing. So maybe if I could just a polite request, right? If I'll humbly, as a messenger here, provide you with a little stamped and sealed letter here to request that retail get a chance to participate. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as I said in previous Q&As that we've had and webinars that I've done, we weren't thrilled with the last with the structure of that last placement, the timing of it, and when we decided to do it, and when we thought that things were going to kick off from a timing perspective, meant that we were restricted in what we could do. What ended up happening is the spud delay was due to us waiting for the arrival of equipment from service provider, and also the rig finishing off their maintenance that they needed to do, and it turned out to be a lot more than anticipated. But we were never going to accept a rig that wasn't ready to drill, because once you start, you don't want to sit there with all your services and everything on hire, on day rate with people, because that's when you start racking up big costs in standby charges, first of all, but more importantly from a safety perspective, making sure that the mud tanks were up to scratch so that they could hold the mud weight that was needed for this top hole section. Because if those burst, because they weren't pressure rated to be high enough, then that would have been catastrophic. That would have stopped this entire program, because these mud tanks are huge, and those aren't things that you can repair quickly, that you can bring in a new set quickly. It's that would have been an absolute showstopper for us. So, and then also making sure, most importantly, that everyone's safe and everyone goes home to their family. So, we were never going to, from the timelines that we were given of when this was going to be completed, and we've got to rely on what we're told by our providers, that this is when stuff's going to arrive, this is when things are going to be repaired and fixed. That's what we work off. So it ended up being three weeks later, and that would have allowed that ability for retail to participate in that previous placement. But look, certainly we sincerely and I sincerely appreciate the support that we've had, and I know that there's a lot of retail interest in our story and in this, and in the next in the next instance, then there'll definitely be a retail component.
Awesome. No, and everything you said is eminently reasonable, right? Just like I say, just it's a bit of a greatest hits. We have definitely covered it, but yeah, just trying to make sure that people feel heard, right? So
look, and also we needed to execute that placement and have it done. Once we took the decision to solve risk, that meant we were exposed, and we had a finite window to close it off, because if we didn't, then we would have been swimming naked, where you've got no partner, you've got no finance, you've got a rig sitting there, and then you're in a world of hurt. So it's that's, and we had to pull the trigger and make that decision. So
No,
thank you. I always appreciate your candor, Scott. Thank you. Mark,
did you get around to my question on the PPSA? I think that was the where are we looking at that being finalised?
Yeah, so the finance bill at the moment is still sitting in Parliament, and the amendments to the Petroleum Act are contained within that finance bill.
Yeah,
and there's a standoff between the MPs and the Minister of Finance at the moment. They're looking to hold to ransom the passing of the finance bill to get additional salary increases and perks,
right.
which is a time-worn tradition. I don't think that's unique to Zimbabwe.
No, why wouldn't you? Maybe. You got an opportunity.
So once that's done, then we're in a position to have that signed off.
All right.
So if you want to help round up 170 MPs or whatever it is to strong arm them, then,
I've got some ideas. I'll share that. I'll share those with you another day.
offline, eh? Yeah.
It's all good. It's all positive.
Frustrating,
I
but
think
we can only control the things we can control.
Yeah,
in that
of
respect.
course.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, I think that's all from me, Matt.
No, well, I think, we're as always, I appreciate your time, Scott. You're very gracious with your time here. These are not short interviews, right? This is a record for us, only about 80 minutes. We're set 90 minutes here now, so that's absolutely speedy for us. Thank you very much, Scott. Obviously, if anybody has any questions, you can fire them off to me or fire them off to Scott. We can try to maybe have another one here in another month or two time, and maybe we can have something to celebrate there with any luck, knock on wood, right? Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody, to Junior Resource Investing.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks for having me once again, and thanks for everyone for your time. And hoping these primary targets that we're chasing in this next whole section are going to deliver the goods. And it's we'll be. In fact, we've probably started drilling out already as we've been speaking, and hopefully we'll have some good news on the way.
Yeah, look forward to speaking to you again in three, maybe 4 weeks. We'll see how we go.
Precisely.
Well, look, when we finish, and again, given rough timelines, but things always are fluid when you're drilling, particularly when it's you haven't done it before. You've got no calibration for each of your sections of how long it's going to take. So we spent a lot longer in this big thick shale than we expected.
Yeah.
And a couple of tool failures along the way, and a trip for a bit change, but because we got ground down during this section drilling that shale. But we're well set up for this next whole section, and hopefully we deliver what everyone's looking for.
I won't argue with seeing with you earlier.
Okay. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thanks, gents.